Welcome to this event, which has been jointly organized by the Royal Town Planning Institute, RTPI, the Commonwealth Women in Planning, CWIP, and International Society of City and Regional Planners, ISOCARP. And the event is to celebrate women in leadership in the planning profession. I would like to ask that you please use the chat function to say hi and tell us where you are joining from. Please also note that the event will be recorded, and I will now, introduce myself and just explain briefly the contents of the session. So after the welcome and introduction from the co-organizers, then Hope, who is my co-chair, will then take the panelists through their session. And I will come back on with to then put some further questions to the panelists. And they will take some questions from the audience and hopefully wrap up. And we are intending to finish at 2 o'clock. That's 2 o'clock GMT. And we are aware that we have got people joining us from all over the world. And so I'd like to say, please, do put down where you are coming from. I can see we've got someone from Zimbabwe. We have someone from the UK, so welcome. Please continue to post your location so that we know where you've logged in from. My name is Helen Fadipe, and I'm the Vice President of the Royal Town Planning Institute. And as I've said already, myself and Hope Magidimisha Chimpongu, we will be co-chairing this event. And you will shortly hear from the co-organizers, Elizabeth Bepe from ISOCARP and Etha Pinnock from the Commonwealth Women in Planning. The Royal Town Planning Institute is an international professional body for planners, and it has over 27,000 members in over 88 countries. The RTPI promotes the worldwide value of planning and its role in shaping a sustainable future. The RTPI is committed to creating a diverse and inclusive profession. We are fully committed to this year's International Women's Theme of investing in women, and especially women in planning. We are delighted that this year, 2024, sees an all-female presidential team for the very first time. This is also noteworthy because the first female president of the Institute, which is well over 100 years old, was elected exactly 50 years ago. In the UK last year, the RTPI State of the Profession report revealed that gender parity was achieved among professionals under the age of 42. And amongst student members, there were slightly more women than men. This contrasts with many places in the world where women are underrepresented, and we need to continue our efforts globally to ensure long-lasting progress. And this can only be achieved through effective collaboration and partnership with other organizations. And we hope that this event will be an opportunity to inspire and encourage fellow women planners. And also it will serve as an opportunity to shine the light on the unique contribution that women make to cities and the communities that we serve. I will now hand over to Elizabeth Bepe, who is the next president of ISOCARP, for our welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Also, many thanks to everyone for participating in what I think is a unique collaborative event of sharing experiences. We all know that multiple crises affect our planet and all our societies, and that planning is more and more emerging or being understood as a critical tool to address this, and also that women in planning are vital to address this. So women in leadership will be a very critical role for the benefit of our society and the planet from now and the future. Where we want to celebrate women leadership and planning, listen to their authentic journeys, and have a genuine discussion. This is what this joint webinar will bring. And this year, we decided also to focus on women leaders in planning of countries that are usually too much underrepresented. So we will hear from voices from Jamaica to South Africa to the Philippines and different countries in between. I'd like to thank many of my colleagues in RTPI and the Commonwealth Association of Planning, particularly Women in Planning, and also my colleagues of ISOCARP Women in Planning for the collaboration on this joint event. This is a way to really carry a stronger voice. I'd like to say a few words about ISOCARP for those who don't know. So we were founded in 1965 as the International Society of City and Regional Planners, and we are dedicated to advancing the field of urban and regional planning globally. And at its core, we seek to connect, to support, and to empower a worldwide network of planning professionals, fostering knowledge exchange and innovative solutions, and continue to push the boundaries. We have a wonderful, diverse membership, exceeding 800 plus individual and institutional members, and from over 90 countries worldwide. Some of our flagship activities include the annual World Planning Congress, and this year we celebrate the 60th World Planning Congress with major events in the Philippines on new regenerative cities, and an event in Siena where we will have the grand finale of our World Planning Congress. Furthermore, we have young planning professional workshops, urban planning advisory teams, publications and awards, cyber agoras, training, all to support professional development. Our Women in Planning Leadership Initiative is much younger. It's 3-4 years old, which I initiated. And we have virtual components and also face-to-face meetings, for instance, in our World Planning Congress. So we recognize that women bring these unique perspectives and invaluable skills to the planning profession, and that the leadership is essential in creating sustainable and equitable cities. We encourage women planners of all stages in their career to seek leadership roles and to actively shape the future. And we also invite both women and men to support this. So welcome to all, and let's make a difference together. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to invite, Elder Pinnock, please. Elder, okay, thank you.
Hi, good morning from Jamaica. My name is Heather Pinnock, and I'm co-chair of the Commonwealth Women in Planning Network. The Commonwealth Women in Planning Network is a support team as part of the Commonwealth Association of Planners, and we're dedicating to giving a gender-based lens to which we can examine the built environment and advance the sustainable development goals, and in general, support women in the planning profession. We work in two main areas. The first is to support, encourage, and promote the role of women in shaping our built environment in every form. And the second is the impact of design on women's safety, prosperity, and empowerment. So we're recognizing that not only is it important for women to be a part of the planning profession, but that all planners give thought to how women and girls experience the built environment and how we can make the world better that way. So on behalf of the Commonwealth Women in Planning Network, thank you for joining us. Happy Commonwealth Day. Today is Commonwealth Day. And please join us, the Commonwealth Women in Planning Network. We are on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And we are very much interested in engaging all women in the planning field, and in particular, our professional colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to you. Oh, thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. You are welcome to this event. Before perhaps I can utter any word, I thought maybe I need to start off by saying this. It is with great sadness, heavy heart, to learn about the passing of Patsi Haile. For those of you who have worked with Patsi Haile or who have read her work, you will agree with me that she was indeed an advocate for women in planning, but also a brilliant scholar, a great writer, and she advocates without any fear the issues around women in planning and the participatory approach. Of course, that's not the end of it. We continue and we have to learn from her strength. We have to learn from all the things that she has contributed to the field and take that forward. Indeed, the heart of a giant has stopped beating, and may her soul rest in peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm greeting you from South Africa, Durban. Right now it's very hot here. My name is Hangwelani Hope Magidimisha. I will be your co-chair with Helena, as already introduced earlier on. You are actually attending a conference or an event organized by RTPI, ISOCARP, and Commonwealth Women in Commonwealth, sorry. So, and this is a safe platform for all the women. We've created a platform for women to actually assist us by sharing their experience from different parts of the world. And it is indeed our hope that at the end of this event, we are all able to tell and able to learn from our colleagues on how they're navigating the everyday life. This will include knowing to say when to say no, as a woman, when to say yes, when to say it's enough, and when to say I'm not able to do that. Among ourselves, we have amazing speakers from different countries. And our aim this afternoon, as per South African time, we aim to take you to different countries right away from where you are right now. We want to take you to different countries. Our first stop this afternoon is going to be in Jamaica, where we will meet with Heather Pincock, who's currently a co-chair for Commonwealth Women in Planning. And of course, after Heather, we are traveling all the way to Kenya. That is going to be our next stop, where we'll hear from Beatrice Hita Gutundi. She's currently a research associate in the International Center for Fragile Innovation. As soon as Heather finishes, we will travel all the way to the Philippines, where we will hear from Haida, Jacqueline, and Malube. And currently, she is the president and the founder for Planet. As soon as Haida finishes, we're going to hear from an urban and regional planning professor, Larissa Manesco, who's also a vice president of Planning Institute of Fortaleza City Hall in Brazil. As soon as she finishes, we leave for in India, and this is where we are hoping our stop will end for today. And this is where we are going to hear from a director and co-founder of Studio Pod, known by the name of Mansi Sahun. Of course, as already mentioned earlier on, our presenters, they have about 7 minutes each, of which they are going to touch on critical points, including success and defining impact. How do they define impact and what are the areas of success? And of course, we expect them to also touch on how do we overcome the systematic challenges from wherever they are with their workspace and from different angles based on their scope of work. We also want to be engaging with all of you. So we are requesting that you keep our chat live by asking questions, putting comments, so that we can take this. So for a start, we will start with our first speaker, all the way from Jamaica. This will be Heather Pincock. Over to you, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, hi, I'm Heather Pinnock, and I am from Jamaica. And I work in Jamaica and across the entire Caribbean region. I was originally trained in architecture. I studied architecture here in Jamaica at the Caribbean School of Architecture. And there I learned how to design buildings. And I didn't realize when I started that I am a planner by nature and also by profession and by training. And so in architecture school, I recognized that I wanted to go bigger. I wanted to understand more. I wanted to be able to have a bigger impact. And then I had the opportunity to go and study planning as my master's program. And I studied planning in London. And just living in London is a master's in urban design, if you ask me. And so I had the awesome experience of studying planning and development in London. And that led me into the world of housing, really. And I spent a good part of my life, maybe about 10 years of my working profession, working in housing, and in particular in affordable housing, and understanding how housing is such a large element of planning, and how the decisions that happen around where housing is located, how housing is done, how that shapes our world. And that's really what drove me further and further into the planning field. And so I began to be particularly interested in how we shape our, not just housing and housing estates, but how we shape our cities, how we shape our regions, and how we shape our world. And that's really, to me, the joy of being a planner, is the ability to shape the world. And I think that is an awesome responsibility. And I think it's a responsibility that simply must include women. The second part of planning that I really enjoy and I think is so important is the ability to look into the future. We are people who can see and envision things that others can't see. And it's something I did not recognize when I was younger, that not everyone can see the world and see into the future and see what things could be in the way that I can. And so what I thought everybody had, I now recognize to be a special skill, and a skill that I share with you, the other women in planning. And I think it's so important that we recognize that we have a special skill, and that our special skill is what drives us together in our cities, in our towns, in our countries, in our regions, and in our world, and what we can do to shape that. Now, one of the great opportunities I've had is I served as the head of Jamaica's largest real estate management and development company, the Urban Development Corporation. It's a large government entity. We had about 1,200 staff, and we worked all across the island. And it was very important to me that we focus on how we can make a difference. And so it was a large and important role in the government of Jamaica. And in fact, very often when I went to meetings with other government heads, other heads of agencies and heads of entities, I would often be the only woman or one of two women in the room. And I realized how important it was for me to speak up, how important it was for me to say what I thought was important, what I knew to be important, both in terms of planning and planning needs, and the long-term vision required for planning, and also for the role of women in that. And I will tell a very short story. When I just started at the Urban Development Corporation, on my first weekend, we had an incident where a body of a woman was found at one of the public beaches that we managed. I remember going and feeling so sad. The public beach was not in the best condition. And I thought, what is it that we could do to have protected this woman and to save her and to make the situation, what could I do as a planner to make this better? And during my time at the Urban Development Corporation, one of the main projects that I championed was a project around public space. And public space is one of the things that I have been looking at extensively throughout my career. And so that parcel of land where I had that heartbreak at the start of my tenure as the head of the Urban Development Corporation, during my time, we did an important project to bring a public park, a free public park, to the city of Montego Bay. That's not the city where I live, but it's another city in Jamaica. And we brought a public park, and it's one of the last things I did before I left. And I remember going back to that same location where that woman had died, and there were hundreds of people, including hundreds of women and children, playing in that park, playing on the beach. And I remember thinking about it. And even now, when I pass that park or visit the park, I think, and I remember that lady. And I think how important it is that we make important decisions. We make guided planning decisions about how we shape our world and how important that is for us to do. And now I work with UN Women as an advisor, a planning advisor for UN Women across the Caribbean, looking at very specifically at public space and how public space is used, can be developed across our region, how it can improve the lives of everyone. Again, that's one of the delights of doing planning. What we do is not for any individual, but instead for everyone in the society. And these are the things that keep me going. And I'm very proud of the work that I do. And I try very hard to encourage others to join me in this work. And that's what has brought me to the place of being the co-chair of the Commonwealth Women in Planning Network, which is how I am here today to share with you. Thank you for hearing my initial story, and I will join you again in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather, for great insight. We will move straight away to Kenya, where we'll hear from Beatrice. Over to you, Beatrice.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this celebration of the Women in Planning. My name is Beatrice Hati. I think my introduction has been done quite well. I possibly am the youngest among the panelists that you see there, which is a great delight because I sit here or stand here representing the young generation of urban change makers. So today I would like to take you through my journey, which is I'll just take you through a reflection of about 10 years, a decade of my practice. And I will go in and out of the various positionalities I've had as a practitioner, as a researcher, as an activist, and now as an academic. And these are terminologies I'll explain as I go on. Just to give you a bit of a background into who I am trained as an urban planner. That is under my undergraduate training. I trained here in Nairobi, Kenya. And immediately after that, I dove in straight into practiced for about 2 years, and realized a couple of gaps in there, which led me to my master's program, which was also about urban development and management. I went back into practice again after my master's. And again, in practice, I also saw gaps and realized I have to go back into academia. So right now, I'm doing my PhD at Erasmus University, Netherlands, also focusing on development studies and issues related to that. Then again, I'm 2 years into the PhD and I realize academics is not everything. So now I'm back again into practice. And I'll take you just through my experience to understand why it has been very important for me to take those different positionalities, and you'll be able to see through that. So through this trajectory that I'll take you through, I will show you how I'm trying to evolve towards more emancipatory processes of planning. And I think I mentioned earlier on, after my training, I immediately went to practice. And therein, I quickly realized that we follow a very conventional process of planning, which is good and a bad thing in its own right. And it's good in that our conventional planning toolkits try and shape how our cities look like. But at the same time, I realized that the traditional urban planning toolkit does not work for the urban marginalized, who are the most actually in our cities. So then quickly I started realizing that this system really marginalizes the people that cities should be focusing on. And just to give you a context, in most African cities, we have over 65% of the population living in informal settlements. And this is the field that I dove into. This is the field that I dove into immediately I got into my planning practice. And I realized, take for example, if you look at the transportation standards, you are required to put in not less than 12 meters access road into neighborhood settlements, which was completely impractical for informal settlements. You go again to amenities, you realize that you need about 1.2 hectares or 3.5 hectares for a primary school and a secondary school respectively. And this could not work. So immediately I started looking at alternative options, and I found myself going into disruptive planning, which is the second phase that you see there. And in disruptive planning, I was trying to look at what alternative mechanisms can work for the cities most marginalized. And quickly there you realize that informal settlements have most times being alienated or being put at the sidelines of planning. So informal urbanism is not a common trajectory, a common practice that we accept in our cities. And so in this era, it was really a phase of doing advocacy and saying that we need to understand our African cities better. Is informal urbanism bad in its own right, or is it something that we can try to embed in our cities? And from that, of course, I will give some examples on how this thinking was successful, but I've then evolved into what I call liberatory planning, trying to look beyond the immediate problem and trying to look at how to change systems, because systems have not looked at these dire issues that we are seeing today. So if I may just draw back to one of the examples that I mentioned earlier, we said that informal settlements had been alienated in our traditional planning practice. And the beauty about having a feminist approach or being a woman in planning is that I quickly realized that through a critical lens, we need to think of the toolkits that we are using for planning. And I do not take full credit for all this thinking. There are a couple of other planners involved and other women involved in this process. And this you see here is the planning process of one of the biggest informal settlements in Kenya. And here the advocacy bit was to try and argue that informal settlements also need to be in the city. The people who live in these settlements are part of the city and they need to be included in that process. And so the discussions around here led to the formulation of a people-led plan, which is what you see on the bottom right on your screen. And this was a fully participatory process and trying to put informal settlements on the map, but not only on the map, but also on the discussion tables in boardrooms of policymakers. Another example was trying to think about resilience in cities. And this is something that I took up later in my profession. And at this point, I was leading the urban program department in the institution that I work in, which is the International Center for Frugal Innovations. And here we're trying to understand how can we better deal with the underlying issues that limit the inclusion of marginalized groups in our cities. So here we are tackling quite a number of different things, looking at the systems, how the policy system is set up, how the frameworks guiding planning are set up, and what we can do to actually implement and do planning that is supporting planning in African cities. And in this sense, I would like to draw your attention to what you see on the screen, which is a publication that we did last year, trying to discuss all the issues that are limiting planning from a feminist perspective or from a feminist approach. As I come to an end, I think my reflection to what you see on the screen was the fact that while we see a lot of limitations in terms of what a woman would see in planning that is not being implemented, I realize there are lots of lessons that are going in between offices, going through doors, but they're not getting to the public realm. So for example, today I just shared with you my experience coming from conventional planning to disruptive planning to liberative planning, but we do not get enough platforms to share that, to share the narratives. So last year, together with a few friends of mine, we set up a new initiative called the Urban Amplified. And what you see here on the screen is basically conversations putting the marginalized groups on a public realm to be able to share their story. And in this sense, the marginalized groups also involve women in planning. So this is just one of the bits, one of the things that we are trying to think about. And as I was sharing my story, I thought the best way to end this conversation was by posing a challenge to you today as the listener. Based on the different positionalities that you're in today, whether you're a student, whether you're a director of an organization, whatever position that you're in, do you think that you can actually inspire and motivate an impactful and meaningful urban practice? So looking at that scale, I wish to challenge you to think, are you on the further left or the further right of that scale? I wish to stop there and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. That was also insightful. We are on our way to Philippines. Heidi, over to you.
Thank you, Hope. I met you in Toronto. Thank you so much. I extend my deepest gratitude to the esteemed women planning leaders from various parts of the world, and special thanks to President-elect Elizabeth Belper, who invited me to join this remarkable group of women, movers and change makers, and share my voice from the global south. Today, I will relate two stories, one from my own journey and another from a tribal leader of our indigenous peoples. I am a planner from the Philippines, and despite my current age, which is in the 50s, I consider myself a young planner. Why? Because planning is my fourth life. In my grade school graduation, our speaker, a lady from the sciences, exhorted us to never stop learning, and I heeded the wise counsel. Beginning as a public servant straight out of college, I pursued a master's with a partial study grant, followed by doctorate while working. Transitioning to the corporate world in public affairs, I retired early with the birth of our fifth child, aligning with a mutual marital decision. One flag here. In my third life, we put up our company that went into socialized housing for the low income bracket. Because I was getting into it as a communication specialist, I endeavored to learn about planning, enrolled for my second PhD in urban and regional planning, and completed all the core courses. I went into academia both to teach and to study. I would fetch all our six kids from school and bring them with me to my evening classes in the university. They did their homework in the family van as they waited. Obtaining my planner's license at 49 in the Philippines, urban planners are licensed as environmental planners. When our fifth and sixth child were 15 and 14 respectively, that's when I got my license. I founded my firm Planet with a double N and pun intended. Planet meaning Earth, symbolizing the essence of our profession as good stewards of it, and Planet as planning network, a mesh and matrix of specialists I am trying to grow, widen, and deepen. Barely a decade, I somehow just came out of hiatus. Rather than considering that period as hibernation, I likened it to the slow growth germination of the bamboo. I think that's the next slide. And where all the blossoming got stored, somewhere in my core, those years when I chose a career speed reduction. The first year, he sleeps. The second year, he creeps. And the third year, he grows and weeps. So our diverse projects span comprehensive land use and water use planning, resources management, adaptive reuse, in-city relocation consulting, transport planning, and designing green facilities like our experience for a green hospital. Now comes my second story from a planning project where I had a profound encounter with Rosalinda. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. The tribal leader of our indigenous peoples. They are called the Dumagats. In our language, this means of the seas. Semi-nomadic people living off of the earth and of the seas. I was asked to head the expedition for the assessment of the coastal water quality and marine biodiversity of Lamon Bay. I wish to point out that the Philippines consists of 7,107 islands, and we are the center of the marine biodiversity. And on this note, I would like to invite everyone to come to the Philippines for the 60th World Planning Congress this September by ISOCARP. So, a marine biologist from Tel Aviv University did the underwater assessments, guided by our Dumagats. Though I took a diving course years before that, it was decided that only the males would do the dive. Red flag here. Bottom line finding, that area of Lamon Bay was still okay, but we recommended constant and serious monitoring to ensure continued health and growth of endemic and other species. While our marine biologist went for his dive, I and my other team members managed the steep slopes of the hills of Cagsiay Tres. The younger members of the team went ahead to check on the Robusta coffee planted by the Dumagats in the highlands. The government department instructed them to do so. However, no post-harvest support was given. We thus recommended follow-through consisting of full technical and marketing assistance. I noticed Nana Rosalinda with her machete. We call it bolo, the all-around tool and weapon in these parts. She was carving the soil. I asked her what she was doing. She said, I'm carving out stair steps so the young ones would have an easier and less precarious time going down. It was just a very natural response and initiative, automatic, almost by reflex. She just simply did it. I took that profound lesson to heart. Her quiet example taught me the profound lesson of empathy, a key trait that effective leaders connecting with the needs of their communities. Beyond these stories, both of us were mothers, were women, considered leading in some ways, notwithstanding the size of our cohorts. I cross checked for pain points and common challenges faced by planners like me and women like us: gender, implicit or unconscious bias, double standards, stereotypes, expectations. I was unable to perform the underwater assessment even as I was head of the expedition because I was typecast and was not expected to do so. It was automatically assumed that I did not know how to dive. Given the limited time in that remote and quite frankly dangerous area, opted not to assert myself and just maximized our time by dividing the work and taking on the hinterland part, the equally uh, important part of the task. While acknowledging potential challenges like limited access to networks, workplace culture, and recognition bias, I feel fortunate not to have personally experienced them. In my firm, we embrace gender bias. This is bias for women, creating an environment where women empower women. Yes, at the cusp of half a century in age, I boldly founded my own firm. Age is a challenge, but women can choose to overcome it. Family demands can likewise be challenging, but women can opt to simulcast. It is never easy, but it can be done. In planning leadership, I believe the key is making wise choices, being brave, standing for what is right, fostering positive initiatives, and constantly leading by example, not in a vociferous manner, but to be like Nana Rosalinda and simply carve a path that will make the world better than how we came into it. Maraming salamat po sa pagkakataon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Heidi. That was very informative.
Hello, everyone. Um, you've crash landed in Mumbai. um, I
Yeah.
want to, I want to just thank everybody for having me become part of this conversation and share my journey and about my little practice in India. So I think about my journey, there's this one quote that I always believe in. Um, what is the city but its people? And that's where the name of my organization also comes. Studio Pod, POD stands for People Oriented Design. And my name is Mansi Sahu, and I'm from Mumbai. I've grown up here. I was not born here, Mumbai, India. I was born in another city. And I have 16 years of practice as an architect, as an urban designer, landscape urbanist, and also planner. So I think, but most importantly, as a woman growing up in a very important part of the 35 years 38 years that I of age that I have. My country is 75 years since we got our freedom. So it's a very important time, and a lot of conversation about development is happening in our country today. I grew up in Mumbai in the 80s. I was a very chubby girl, very different from a lot of normal, if you would say. I was considered abnormal, but I had a lot of athletic spirit, so I used to play a lot of badminton. And I think that was my first lesson as a kid. I think I realized that my build my physical build, had nothing to do with my stamina, with how I could play badminton. That was the game I used to play. And I also realized that often a lot of my opponents misjudged my game, because they thought I would not be able to cover the court. But I was very good at my game, and I think that made me a person that does not give up very easily. By the age of 18, I also had parents who loved to travel. So I think they exposed me to a lot of different cultures, a lot of different countries throughout the world, to a lot of different cuisine, and to the nuances of different neighborhoods, cities. And I think that's what made me pursue architecture personally. And yeah, here in India, after doing architecture for 5 years, my first job as an architect was to build toilets. So I had to build almost 110 toilets for a campus. And it wasn't the most glamorous first project that someone would get, but I think it also made me realize that while I was building 110 toilets for the campus, within the construction, marked area, we only had the toilets for male engineers and supervisors, and there were the female toilets that was combined for everyone, because there was such less female uh, engineers on site. And I think it was an irony, because every time I would build a toilet, I would actually have to hold my pee till lunch to get a decent toilet to relieve myself. And I think that's something that made me realize that we are still in a very male dominated field, in India and globally. And I went back and I spoke to my mother. My mother was one of the first lady engineers for electrical engineers for Indian Railways. And she told me that for 35 years, she was struggling in a male dominated system. And she thought it would have gotten better by my time, but it's still not better. And I think that's what made me realize that more than an architect, I want to work on these really underlying issues of inequality, of planning, that don't really consider the 50% of the population that is often silenced by things that have been happening over the years. So I actually went to do my master's in Columbia University in New York. I studied urban design in one of the craziest, most happening cities in the world. And it taught me so much. It also taught me of so many mistakes that planning wise globally have happened, and that my country was, often just replicating, because I don't know, because we have a problem of copying and pasting things from the world directly into our context without really realizing its impact. And my first job after New York was in Accra, where I was very nervous, because I thought, Africa and India are very different contexts. And I thought I will not understand, and I'll be the odd person out. But oddly, I actually related the most to the women in the communities. I was working with the community in Accra, in Corlegono, and I realized that the women were more open towards talking to me when we did community engagements. I was having the most fun with the neighborhood women. I actually got my hair braided, and had so much fun. And I realized that it was so simple to relate to each other as human beings and just talk about some basic issues that are still not addressed, like having they did not have the right vehicles when someone was pregnant and they needed to be taken to the hospital. They did not have creches for children. They wanted skill training, they wanted jobs, they wanted so many things that are globally the same. And that actually made me realize that I really wanted to work back in my country and make sure that whatever I have learned through my masters, my work. So I came back to India in 2013. I co-founded an urban design and urban planning practice in India called Studio Pod. And it's been 10 years since we started. And today we have more than 50 projects. We just finished a streetscape in India, which is my favorite place in the world, because whenever I go there in the evening, I see dignified spaces for women and children. At 7 p.m., children are just smiling and laughing and playing, and it's a safe public space that does not really exclude people based on gender or the economic status of a person. Now, when we started StudioPod, I was unmarried, and talking about traditional barriers in India, we've always had master strokes and master planners, single architects who have built cities. And today, the conversation is very different. It's about having dialogues. It's about including everybody. And yet, I had two male partners, and often clients always saw me as, the unmarried woman partner that would probably peel off after she has a baby or after she got married, and was not. This is something that I've often faced. A lot of the times, men are not used to talking to women in my country, so they don't know how to talk to women. So they often look at my partners when they are addressing important issues, because they feel like they will understand it more. But I think the one thing that I've also realized is that even though I was the youngest architect, urban planner, urban designer in a lot of important conversations when we were doing projects as part of USTDA, as part of smart cities and different projects, I realized the fact that I was present there and I could simply blatantly talk about some very important and very common sense issues actually helped for a lot of projects. So I really think that urban planning and urban design is about dialogue, is about observation, is about making these smaller changes. And the more people we have on the table that have different perspectives, have different histories, the more interesting the conversation will be, and the more interesting the outcome will be. So I think going back to that chubby kid, sometimes even today when I enter a boardroom or an important conversation, I see sometimes very bullyish men who have this macho presence, and I think that that little girl comes back to life, and something inside me says it's okay, just fight it out, and just you're doing the right thing, and that's what helps me come back and keep working. So I guess
Yeah.
that's my journey. So my only 2 cents would be that just show up every day, even if you have to go back, take a good cry, come back, because your presence will make all the difference.
Thank you very much, Mansi, and that was also very informative. I think we have to take our flight back to Brazil. We have to check if, yes.
Let's try. Is it working now?
Yes, perfect.
Properly. Great. So first of all, I would like to thank you everyone to be here learning a lot with the other experiences, and also to share a little bit about my perspective in different levels, personal level and institutional level and regional level as well. I've been studying architecture and urban planning, and afterwards I had the opportunity to go further on urban management in Berlin, where I could meet a lot of people from Global South as me, because my course was addressed for the developing countries. So I learned a lot, and I had the opportunity to get to know, to visit, and to do practices in other realities similar of my reality, as I could spend some months in Bangladesh, in Cambodia, and so on. To be here to talk a little bit about my background and my trajectory, I was asked about the meaning of success for urban planners on leadership. And I was wondering, thinking about it, how to share and even creating new perspectives on that, because we are not asking ourselves every day about what is our role in this leadership process. The first point that I realized is that being a leader in urban planning is very different of being a leader in a private company who is not leading with the city. In our case, our decision-making process impacts the city. And in my case, personally, my decision-making process impacts in the fourth biggest city in Brazil, where are living 2.4 million of inhabitants who leads with the extreme inequality day by day. So we have a huge challenge as my colleagues as well. And another point is that to be in urban planning, as some of you already could share it here, is not a solitary activity and shouldn't be. We cannot do it as a process alone. And how to define this success of leadership on urban planning, I would say that it is connected to continuous learning, and that when we can promote orchestration of shared, innovative, and data-based management. So we cannot do anything alone, not as a person, not as architects and urban planners. We have to talk with other experts, with the local community, and we can define the steps for the urban development together. And we need to use co-creation processes. And also we have to be focused on promoting a more diverse and unequal world and cities. In the global south, I would say that our challenges are even bigger. We usually are leading with those scenarios of scarcity of resources. Then we have to balance, to look for the development, but also to try to keep the sustainable social and economical and environmental aspects, while we still have to identify strategic opportunities to break biased scenarios and promote collective progress. The impact of this management can be measured not only through traditional metrics, but also through the change of behavior. And then the success is going to be measured if we really got to bring cities more inclusive with more long-term results. Another point that I'd like to share is to talk about the overcoming systemic challenges. I have to share a bit more of my personal experience than my first opportunities at leadership as an urban planner were not spontaneous. They were resulted from the selection process that allowed me to get strategic positions in shaping urban policies and participatory processes for the city, besides improving my own experiences. I just broke my glasses. The selection process for defining senior positions in the public sector are highly democratic and provide an excellent opportunity to improve management. But unfortunately, this selection process do not always happen. This is when the challenge for recognition becomes even more remarkable. What helped me to be more recognized and to generate new opportunities was when I understood that I didn't just need to do the work, but I also had to be able to communicate what was done and its impacts through synthetic reports of results, even if not required, using infographics and simple visual language so it can be learned at a glance. This kind of action brought me new opportunities. To talk about another level, my institutional level, I am working at the Planning Institute of Fortaleza City Hall, where I am currently the vice president. I would like to share that we have 100% of the directors that are women. So we do have an intentional action to empower women at the public sector at the planning processes. Our work there is based on 3 axes, which is planning and project, data and evidence, and governance, and working as a hub of international development agendas like Sustainable Development Goals and New Urban Agenda. In these 3 axes, we are trying transversally to be innovative, to be able to optimize the scarce resources and achieve our 2 main goals: inequalities reduction and sustainable urban transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. It was indeed insightful. I think we have heard from our great speakers. I will now hand over to my colleague, my co-chair, Helen. I think it's over to you now for facilitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. That was very inspiring. And I think that is one of the shortest trip around the world that I've ever done. And it was great hearing all these stories from these women. We are running slightly behind schedule, but hopefully we should be able to catch up. And so without further ado, I would like to pose a couple of questions to our distinguished all female-led panelists. It's very, very inspiring to see these women at the top of their game, and they've made immense contribution to planning in their areas. So the first question I've got, and this is to all panelists, and it will be quite useful if the panelists answer in the same order in which they were to present. I know that we had Manse going before Larissa. However, for this session, can we just keep to the first order? I don't think there is any place for me to see if your hand is up or not. And if you don't have anything to add to that question, you could just say pass, but just say something. All right. So the first question is to everyone on the panel. And I would like you to respond in turn, 2 minutes each. And so the first question is this: what novel narratives and practices does women leadership add to contemporary planning and development of cities? And what small change / perspective have you brought to the table as a woman? Okay, and if you don't mind just giving one example of successful intervention. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go first. I think I'm next. So I do think it, as I have said before, I do think it is so important for women to be at the table, because a lot of our world, in fact, most of our world was designed for able-bodied men. And so there are many things in how our cities are designed, how our planning is happening, how our policies are designed, that are really focus and lean towards and start from a root of what is it that men would need. And that's everything from where the buttons are to how high the sidewalks are. Everything is just based on what men do. And I have really had the pleasure of working with a project called Her City. It's a UN Habitat toolbox. And that's one of the tools we have used across the Caribbean in looking at the resilience planning in across the region. And it has been so important in using the girl child as an example of the most vulnerable in our society, and how if we plan for the girl child, including not only the physical space, but the spaces that would make her feel safe, not intimidated, nowhere where there are dark corners. Those are the kinds of things that I am very proud to have been able to bring to our planning function here in Jamaica and actually across the entire Caribbean as an important way of relooking at the world, of looking at the world that's not only from the point of view of an adult male, but how do the rest of us experience the world. And just to say that by planning for the girl child, we also are able to plan for the most vulnerable in our communities. And I think it is most important that everyone and we as planners recognize that the work that we do and it changes how everyone experiences the world. It really is such a powerful profession, and it behooves us to make sure that we consider everyone.
Thank you very much. So the next person is Beatrice.
Yes, sure. If I can go, I think one of the critical things that I see women bringing to the table is critical analysis, being able to see things that other people will not be able to see. And for me, it goes beyond critical analysis. You may see a gap, you may see something that does not work, but what do you do about it? Seeing is not enough. So then what I see women bringing on the table is that the ability to get disturbed by something that does not work, but then the ability to also bring an action to help that being disturbed. And one of the examples that I think when I reflect back into my practice, there is, of course, one example that I shared in my presentation of the planning for an informal settlement. And the planning for that informal settlement took what we call an alternative approach. An alternative approach because the conventional standards, the conventional mechanism of planning for informal settlements was not working. All the standards that were being provided for infrastructure, for water, were not working. And of course, if you go by the conventional standards, then it means that you eventually kick everybody out of that settlement and you provide all that infrastructure that you need. So I think I pride really myself in that, engaging in that process to really advocate with the decision makers that the toolkits that we have do not work for marginalized communities. And actually, that's really a concept that is really embedded in feminism thinking, that you can be able to see who is really marginalized in the context that you're leading or in the context that you're working, and how do you bring on mechanisms to onboard those people or to include the marginalized groups in a more equitable development. So I think the definition of alternative standards for informal settlements, which were now used in one settlement called Mukuru in 2017, going all the way to 2020, was really something I would consider a success factor. And even better to see that that strategy has been replicated now in other two informal settlements in Nairobi now. So I feel that is really one of the success factors I would really like to draw on. Over to you, Helen.
Okay, thank you for that. And I would like to call on Eddie to bring our own perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is my audio okay? Yes, okay.
Yes, it's okay.
In the Philippines, we have the Department of Housing and Human Settlements and Urban Development. It is really a male-dominated department, and this is the department that approves our what we call here the comprehensive land use and water use plans for a certain local government unit. So I headed a team that undertook this planning process, and it's a long process because it's participatory. And what happened there was, although there's a guideline, there are like a 12-volume manual to do that in this country. I said this could actually be simplified because some of the things that are there are not necessary, because there are those that you need just to focus on the uniqueness of a place, for example, uh, where you and in some other ways there are standards that you just apply to places, right? So they had wanted us to just follow all the 12 volumes of them.
So I'm going to ask Larissa, yeah, if you don't mind just coming in, and then we can always go back to AD.
Okay, thank you. We are trying to develop a gender-centered method of planning here in Fortaleza, what we are calling experimental microurbanism. The proposal is to do a very small, very good experience and have the city as a lab, as a laboratory. Because usually we say that we are trying to plan with data-based information, but in the urban subject, it's not so fast to have the results to be able to analyze and to reorientize the planning process. In this way, in this sense, we started to do very small experiences that are people-centered, actually women and kids and elderly centered, that we can use very innovative approaches of urban interventions and environmental interventions, such as nature-based solution, that we are still not experienced enough to bring to the whole city, but for a small area, we can do that. And we are co-creating this process and measuring before, during, and after the experiment. And also having some control areas where we can see how does it work in other areas with similar context and no intervention, and also with conventional intervention, not innovative intervention. So we are trying, experimenting it in the city, registering to try to create manuals, tutorials to the new urban planners that are coming to the municipality, in order that they are able to keep the lenses on the gender issue as well, without forgetting it. We are trying to institutionalize it, the urbanism feminist.
You're muted, Helen.
Thanks for that. I think the last person for that question is Mansi, and then we will take the second round. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I think a lot of good points have already been covered. And for us, for me specifically, public realm has been a place of interest. Streets, parks, how do we make those spaces very inclusive and open for everyone, including women and children? And I think one thing that we have learned is while we're doing planning, policies, guidelines, edge conditions at a bird's eye level, the intervention at the human scale level, the ground floor, the compound wall, the edge of the park, and sometimes even the kind of things inside the park. Because in India, a lot of parks are just designed for, as they grow up, mostly men and boys, and a lot of girls don't play and often don't find enough games to play in parks. We have cricket, we have football, and they're often male dominated. So the idea of including not just different genders, but also different sports has been something that I've been trying to do in a lot of public space projects that we're doing. Making streets safer, making them more lively, adding retail spaces, adding lights. Something as simple as lights has been a struggle for a lot of the cities that we're working with. So I think that's been a journey that I have been on how do you make places at an eye level safer and more fun for everyone, and especially in the public realm. They shouldn't be boring, they should be fun, so that people want to come out on the streets and meet each other.
Thank you very, very much. The next question, I would ask all the panelists to please make it very, very brief, because we need to recover some time. And so please just do that. I'm going to read out the question, and then again, we will start in the same order. So the second question is regarding mentoring the next generation. So beyond professional skill building, what aspects of mentorship do you think are most crucial for empowering women in the early and mid stages of their planning careers? How can we create more effective networks, not just connections, but for sustained support? And the first question, and that question again goes to all the panelists, and starting with Heather. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, networking is very important. And of course, today I am here as part of the Commonwealth Women in Planning network, because it is so very important that we find ways to reach each other and support each other. In fact, one of the things I think is most missing, not only in planning, but just in women being professionals, is the lack of ongoing support. And like you said, sometimes there's one-off mentorship, but how do we make it a sustaining long-term effect? And the truth is, I do not have a full answer, but I will say that we are trying through the network, and we again encourage you to join the network. It is so important to see other women doing well. It is so important to hear the stories of other women and how they have struggled. It is very important for us, each of us in our little way, to open the door, to lift up, to send the elevator back down. For there are many people who have helped me, and so I try to multiply that and help as many as I can. I remember meeting a senior woman in my profession once who said that a younger person, she had gone through a hard time, and so she thought it was important that the rest of us go through a hard time. And I said, no, it is so important that we clear those barriers, that we make space, because even greater things can come if we remove the blockades. Those of us who have been held back, need to move those barriers so that what will come will be greater than we ever imagined. So again, a plug to say, please join our network as well, particularly on LinkedIn. We try to make it a professional networking area, and I look forward to engaging you. And this session in particular has been an awesome support for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just plead with all the rest of the panelists, keep it to less than 1 minute, please, because we need to take questions from the audience. So the next speaker, by now, it should be Beatrice. Please just keep it very succinct and brief. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Picking up from what Heather said, that we need to clear boundaries, we need to clear blocks that are there for other women in planning. I think for me, based on my experience, I hit lots of blocks before I got to where I am right now. Sometimes I would ask for opportunities, I would ask for guidance from women who have already made it in the practice, but I could not get that assistance. So I think sometimes we need to avoid romanticizing the community around women. And I think through my practice, that is what now I'm trying to change. I could not get that assistance. And so, as I mentioned, last year we started the Urban Amplified. And the role of that Urban Amplified is to ensure that mentorship starts by listening. Any effective mentorship starts by listening. What are women going through? What is their experience? What hurdles are they facing? And then from there, that's when you build the connection, the networks that you need. So I think I would say it all starts by listening. Let's create a platform for women to share their experiences.
Thank you very, very much for that. And Eddie, thank you.
Okay, I hope this works now. Okay, I will cite two examples. One was when I did our consulting firm was consulted for a comprehensive land use planning process, and I told the local government unit that I do not want a second consultancy with them, because we will be doing hand holding, mentoring, and so the next time it should be their own group that will be implementing these planning processes that we will mentor them with. And fortunately, I think they were able to get everything, and so now they are doing it on their own. So it was an effective mentoring, and most of them are female planners. So the second one is from my very own family. Like I mentioned earlier, that I bring my kids to the university with me, and maybe my second daughter, who is also now in architecture and in urban planning, was effectively mentored by their mom, because she's now in the same field and doing well in it. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Larissa, I didn't realize I was muted. Larissa, please.
Okay, so first of all, I think that nowadays I am full of hope, because I see this new generation much more aware about all those subjects and looking for information.
We've lost Larissa. I'm going to have to move on. Larissa, if you can hear me, apologies, I have to move on because we've lost you. So Mansi, can you come on, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to keep it super short. I think planning with ambition and not prejudice is something I would tell all the women just redefine everything. Don't take anything for granted if you have the power to do so, and be kind to each other, because at the end of the day, that matters the most, to help, and everybody's covered most of the things. The only thing I would say is don't let any other woman quit, because it happens in my country a lot. Educated women quit because of family pressures. So if you see somebody quitting, offer a hand, offer some way to help that person to come back into the profession, because we cannot afford to lose any educated planners to the luxuries of home, I think, because we need to make our cities and world better. I think
You're muted, Helen.
I was just saying that thank you for that, and I'm going to hand over to Coach. Please stay on the platform because we've got some questions from the audience, and so it will be good if you can just stay on and then answer. So I'm going to just close my screen so that it can focus on my coach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you everyone for your contribution. We have a question there from Olufemi. She's asking what would be, she wants to find out from the panelists, and here I'm just going to ask anyone to answer without any particular order because I'm worried about time. So she's asking, how do you define success in your various leadership? How do you define success? When do you know you are successful? Who wants to take this first?
I'm happy to go first, Hope, if that's okay.
Okay, it's fine.
Yes, success is for me, it's very subjective, right? So it's how you define it and how you see it. And for a long time, I defined success in terms of impacts. How many people do I see lives changing? What communities do I impact? How many people do I work with? How do I see them transitioning in their life? Until then, I came to realize that I also need to be in that success factor. If nothing is changing in terms of my philosophies, my ideologies of development and seeing urbanism in different ways, then for me, that is not success. So I'll summarize that by saying success needs to be outward looking so that you look at the impact you're making to communities, to society, to policy, to the planet, but it also needs to be inward looking so that you focus on what is the meaning that you draw from your practice. Is there meaning? Then that becomes success.
Thank you very much. Who wants to try again from the panelists?
Can I add?
Yes, please.
So I think for me, success is a process, because failure is a very important part. Because if you learn from your failures, then the next time you're doing it better. So it's important to fail and also learn from it and keep showing up again, because you have a larger vision in mind. So success is a process. I think if you finish whatever you're doing every day, show up the next day with the larger vision, you're successful. And if you keep doing that long enough, you'll reach your goals eventually.
Thank you very much. One more person who wants to try this one. How do you define success, Ahida?
Thank you, Hope. It's Heidi. Yeah, I didn't get to finish earlier, and it is also related to this question. So like I said, we are able to simplify the 12-volume manual process into the processes that we implemented as participatory, and eventually the institution approved the ones that we came up with. And so I think that's a successful endeavor that we were able to come up with. I think it was Mansi who said that like this 12-volume manuals really just encourage copy pasting, and that is not the way to do it. Yes.
Thank you very much. Ida, you want to try?
I will just kind of echo and build on what Beatrice said, and I think impact is really my mark of success. One of the things that gives me the greatest joy is when I pass a public park or pass a project and I see it being used by people, and that's what we do. We shape the world. So when we see the world being used by people, that's when we know we have a success. And there are many ways to mark that impact, but I will tell you my heart is full when I see people using the spaces I've created.
That's very good. And Larissa?
Yes, maybe when we get to change structural behaviors on the society. If I mention one example, we heard that 1% of the land is the ownership of the land is for the female, only 1%. And here in Brazil, since public policies that says that new social housing have to be held by the women, now we are here in Fortaleza already with 30% of women ownership. So it's a way that we can show that strategic measures, strategic public policies can change strategical structures.
Thank you very much, ladies, for all your contribution. Did I miss any questions here? Let me just check. It's so surprising hearing about the negative experience of the panelists regarding their interaction with the other female. And okay, that's the case. So I think there's a comment there. I don't know whether Beatrice you want to give a reaction on that, but we need to go towards the closing so that we can summarize. Just your quick reaction in less than a minute. If you want to react on that comment about the experience with other female planners, and then we can move to the next item. Thank you very much. Just in a minute, less than a minute or so.
Sure. I think the comment also makes reflection to something I said earlier, that we should not romanticize the women community that we keep talking about. There are instances where you actually reach out to women and they don't offer you any support. And I have one particular instance. I think I was trying to figure out my way into the conventional way of planning. And I talked to a very senior planner who is also a woman. And so I was motivated to talk to them because they are way advanced in the field. They have experienced quite a number of prejudices and marginalization. So I expected support from them. But, well, they told me that, of course, you have to give it time. I'm much older in the practice, so just respect the older people in the profession, and you'll get there when you get there. So for me, it didn't feel like any form of support, right? That if you have journeyed that journey, you should be able to really guide someone into a way that they should be able to follow and what to avoid and what to take up. So definitely, according to Fumi's comment, it is truly something that we need to take up as women, that you must support. I think it's also a commitment that we should take as a responsibility, that we must support women who are in our network. It's not a privilege. So we need to take it as a commitment.
Yeah, thank you very much, ladies, for all your input. I think you have kept us going and you kept us thinking. And as I was sitting here and I'm going towards the end, before I can call my co-chair here to say, what is it that is coming across all five of you? And I find it very interesting that you're all talking about the advocacy for the profession itself. We need to advocate for the profession, and we make sure that everything is quite clear, and make sure that we recruit more. You all spoke about the mentorship. We need mentorship in this space to make sure that we bring or groom the young generation of planners coming after us. And I could sense across five of you the go-getter spirit when you say, I was the only one, and this is what I have to do. And you keep pushing and keep pushing. And I think that's the most important thing that I want to flag, that the resilience in you guys. When things feels like they're falling apart, you come back and hold on and said, no, I'm not going to give up. And I think that is very key, the examples that you give, the lived experience that you have shared. You talk about listening. It's very important to listen to one another so that you can able to relate the experience, to able to relate how other people are feeling. You also talk about the impact, that we cannot just be women planners. Let's bring some impact on the table. What is our contribution? If we are to die tomorrow, how are we going to be remembered? You also touched on that in a various way. And I like this last question that you were all trying to answer about the success, which you also obviously link it to the impact. So my parting shot to say, I think this was a very amazing session, Helen, and thank you very much for the organizers from all the three institutions. And I think they've done exceptionally well, creating the platform for women to share their ideology, to share their experiences. This was very amazing. And this is just the start of many, and we should have many of this more, not just on Women's Day, but or Women's Month as such. So I just wanted to say we are stronger together. We have to stick together, sisterhood, and thank you very much.